Woodrow Wilson could beat the crap out of yours.
You think so, huh?
Yeah, he's got one little shrivelly arm.
Good point.
Wilson's some, tweedy intellectual, but I bet he could still take him.
But the Kaiser's kind of... Never mind.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I thought. Fritz.
Anyways, guys, if you haven't figured this out already, this is the World War I themed two-gun action challenge match.
Yes.
It's actually October, but the reason we're doing this October is because these videos are going to actually run on the channel in November, which is the 100th centennial of the Armistice
Yep.
of the end of the war.
The end of the war to end all wars, which didn't quite.
No, it doesn't end all wars, but that's what they thought at the time because the catastrophe that World War I was seemed like it might have ended everything. In fact, I think what's interesting about this is, people in modern days talk about World War II quite a bit. Like, it's still very much a topic of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And World War I's become more of a topic of the day because it's the centennial. However, if you ask me, historically speaking, World War I is what changed the world.
Yeah. World War II is a direct result of the end of World War I.
Yep, but World War I made the world we live in today. It changed the Middle East in the way that we now have this, and ISIS and that kind of stuff has a direct line straight to what happened at World War I, as well as many of the geopolitical things that we find ourselves in today.
Indeed.
And World War II didn't have a strong effect in that regard.
It had some.
But it was more of a modification of what World War I set in place.
Yep.
So I think that when we want to talk about the war that really changed the world, it's this one.
Hell, the whole Cold War came from it.
Yep, that's true.
The Soviet Revolution, the Soviet overthrow of the Tsars was a direct result of World War I.
1917.
Maybe would have happened anyway, but it maybe could have been avoided.
Yeah, good point. And it's interesting to note that when you think about that, the Germans actually did win the Eastern Front in World War I.
Yeah, they really
the Russians collapsed and it became the Soviet Union. And at that point, it eventually became the Soviet Union. And then they moved their forces west and they tried with one final ditch effort, the Ludendorff Offensive, to end the war.
Yeah, and then we showed up.
I don't think it's entirely that, but we'll get into that in the discussions in the videos. But
2 million Americans makes a big difference.
So does the flu.
This is true.
But that's a whole other conversation for later in the match. But we have 3 stages today, not 4.
But they're pretty awesome stages.
Yeah, the reason for that is these are all 3-minute par times, and they are extensive. And as you will see as you watch this, they are very, very much in theme with what we're trying to portray.
We got grenades, we got trenches, we got wire. It's not quite barbed.
Nah, we didn't go with the barbed wire.
Range rules are a little, ooh, you can't have barbed wire. You'll hurt yourself.
Yeah, what's with these ranges, The safeties. Safety, I always say safety third. Yeah, absolutely. But in that regard, there's another thing that happened. The Great Magnet blessed us with rain and mud.
Yeah.
So we actually got the range to dig us a trench for one of these stages, and we're going to be shooting from it. But then we've had days of rain out here in Arizona, which is really unusual, and we've got a pretty big mess out here.
It's a little slippery. It's not quite Passchendaele mud.
No, it's not that. We're not sinking into our death.
Yeah, we will not have any casualties from mud.
For those in the audience who are not aware of that, there were people in Passchendaele that literally got so stuck in the mud that their friends and soldiers could not pull them out, and they slowly sunk for days while they lost their minds to drown in it.
Yeah.
That's how bad World War I was.
Yeah.
So, what are you shooting today?
I am shooting model of 1915 CSRG Shosha. 8mm Lebel caliber.
But wait, this is an American uniform. This is a French gun.
Yes, it is.
Explain.
The American Army went into World War I with no units large enough to be called a division.
Really?
And a couple hundred machine guns total in the entire Army inventory.
Okay.
And Americans needed some sort of firepower. We took rifles. We were good on rifles, but we basically had bupkis for machine guns. So what we did is borrowed and bought machine guns from the French.
And you got the Shosha.
Yep. So the American Expeditionary Force used 1915 Shosha automatic rifles. They did also have a 30-06 version, which saw very, very limited use, mostly training. I actually have one of those, but I don't have magazines to run it.
Yep.
And I have plenty of magazines to run this one. And this is what the American forces actually used in World War I.
So you train with the American cartridge back home, but you go to the front with the French cartridge.
The American cartridge never even got to the U.S. Those guns were all in France.
Oh, so they trained with them in France, but when you go to the front, you're using the 8mm Lebel.
Exactly, yeah.
I have had the opportunity to shoot both the 8mm and the 30-06, and I gotta say, I don't know why, but there's some things on this gun, the 8mm, where it really handles better.
It actually is better. Now, there is one thing that I have done here, which is wrap some burlap around the end of the stock, and I did that very deliberately.
Yep.
You are supposed to shoot this with kind of a position that is uncomfortable and unusual for Americans. Namely, you blade off about 45 degrees to the gun. And the idea is there's a receiver end cap on that thing that will come back and hit you right in the cheekbone, and it's very unpleasant.
Break you thy facey?
Probably doesn't break your face, but it'll bruise you up. It's not cool. It certainly impedes your marksmanship.
Yep.
And so the French standard training procedure was you blade off at a very steep angle away from the gun. I actually had a chance to talk to a historian who interviewed an American Shosha gunner from World War I. This was a couple decades ago when the guy was still around. Very sharp memory, and he specifically said they did exactly this. They'd wrap a chunk of cloth around the back of the gun, and then they line up right behind it like traditional American marksmanship.
Fair.
And when we were trying this out before the match, I found that to give me a substantially better sight picture.
Turns out they were right.
So that's what I'm going with. We'll see how it works.
And a 1911 pistol.
Yep, in my fake left-handed holster.
Yeah.
Because I am left-handed. So
Fair
I will
enough.
be shooting this entire match right-handed with the show shot, so weak hand there. We're weak shoulder. But I have a 20-round capacity machine gun.
Yep.
To your bolt-action rifle.
But you're semi-automatic and full automatic. And yeah, so I'm using the backbone of the Imperial German Army.
Yep.
This is the Gewehr 98 with the, as we call it, roller coaster sight, or the Langgewehr.
Langgewehr.
It's that little roller coaster. The idea behind this is it didn't have a spring. Anyways, it's a pretty bad sight picture, and it is 0 to 400 meters.
I don't think we have any targets that far out.
Nope. So you got to learn how to aim with this gun, but it is the backbone of the Imperial German Army, and it is the right rifle for me to be using as representing a late war German soldier.
You don't look nearly hungry enough to be a late war
I
German
need to be
soldier.
starving a little more.
You seem to have found an extra turnip somewhere.
I probably did. That said, some of the gear here and some of the people in the audience are always going to freak out that it's a little anachronistic. I do have pouches here for stripper clips because I am using a proper C96 broom handle Red 9 in 9mm, but I need extra stripper clips because in World War I, guys didn't reload their pistol over and over and over again like we would at a match. So I have to add a pouch here that's not really period correct to be able to have reloads.
Yeah.
However, these pouches are correct, the holster's correct, got a bread bag back here.
Got a long old bayonet there.
I've got a butcher blade. Hold that for a second, actually. So this is originally a butcher blade, and of course the length of that and the angle of that. And it did have the saw teeth on it at one point, but as probably the audience is aware of, there was a statement that if a German soldier was caught with that sawtooth bayonet, that they would be executed for crimes against humanity of sorts, or being essentially an inhumane soldier.
Yeah.
So they took them back from the front and they milled the saw teeth off, even though the goal of that sawtooth was never to cause injury.
That was actually just an engineer's tool, but the optics didn't look good.
Yep.
And if you were a German soldier, the idea of who cares if you got saw teeth on the bayonet? If you have to stab someone with it, it'll work fine without saw teeth. And you don't want to run the chance of getting executed instead of being able to surrender.
Exactly. So those got milled off, so you didn't have that issue anymore. And that is a really long, super duper, crazy length bayonet. The idea behind that being when you're charging the enemy, you have more length than they do. The French took that to an extreme with their bayonets, which are like the length of the rifle, I swear.
Yeah, the label in its bayonet's actually a little longer than this thing.
And I guess I should have taken this out when we're talking about it. But here's the broom handle in 9mm. Now the barrel's a little shorter than the one you would have seen in the war, but it is a Red 9 and it is chambered in 9mm. So for all intents and practical purposes, that's what I'll be using for my pistol. I will not be using the stock as a shoulder holster. I mean, as a shoulder stock, because it is a pistol for this match, and that is my rifle. Yeah, I don't want to violate our rules. And it is stripper clip fed, which means, of course, I am gaming this up and have all the advantages over you, and that I have 3 extra rounds to your 7.
Yeah, I've got a machine gun. Here, you can have that back.
3 extra rounds to your 7.
I've got 15 extra rounds to your 5.
3 extra rounds to those 7. That's going to make the difference. Yep. And let's talk about that. We are both wearing the poppy today.
The poppy is the international symbol of remembrance for World War I and has been for almost 100 years now. You don't see it all that much in the U.S. Here in America, we don't have that much cultural tie to World War I, not like they do in mainland Europe. You see it far more frequently over there, and it really is a very serious cultural thing in Europe.
That's one thing we want to talk about when we're doing a match of this type where we're representing, the war to end all wars or the Great War is the loss to humanity in general. We're talking millions and millions of human beings. And who knows what those people had with them that they lost on the battlefield, shot in the head, crossing no man's land. Maybe there was the cure for cancer in one of those brains. That kind of thing is immeasurable, but we know that the loss to humanity and the loss to homes and families on all sides of the war was horrendous.
Yep.
Incalculable. So guys, stay tuned for more videos from the 2-gun action challenge match. We're going to bring stage 1 to you in the next video.